Welcome to Conversations at Meridian, which is a series where we just kind of talk about interesting things related to a variety of related but somewhat different topics. Obviously, we're talking a lot about artificial intelligence and what people would call this is complicated because is it vibe coding or is it coding with Claude or whatever? A bit of crypto, more like blockchain technology things, how those interface with the world, plus some day-to-day life things with the world of Silicon Valley, New York City elements that touch on that, yada, yada, yada. So I'm Aren Rendell of the Meridian Update. I am currently posting one of my TikToks, so I'm going to hand it off to Walter to give his intro.
Yeah, I'm Walter Phillips of Meridian Research. As Aren said, we're talking about buzzword salad, all the things. Honestly, throw quantum in there too.
Buzzword
Just
salad.
have fun. Just have fun.
We need a buzzword salad signature sound.
We can find that.
Should we call the podcast Buzzword Salad?
Yeah, that could be fun.
That's actually kind of funny. All right, this podcast has been newly renamed Buzzword Salad. We're gonna have to look into the trademark situation.
Yeah.
I'll email our trademark lawyer in a second. My trademark lawyer. I don't think you have a trademark lawyer. You should get one. So we're talking about something interesting today. Tee it up for us.
We're talking about getting hacked, things getting leaked, the full spectrum of that. Sometimes it's you kind of leak the thing yourself. Sometimes you get hacked by a North Korean state actor. There's a whole range of things that could happen. But a lot of this has been happening lately in the tech world. Silicon Valley, not Silicon Valley, New York or SF typically is where these things are happening. But sometimes the attacks are from North Korea. Sometimes they're from ? Who knows where. But there's lots of hacks that have been happening. And I think the most interesting part to this is that there's all this AI coding and there's arguments for whether or not the AI coding is helping or hurting. Like what's the uptick caused by? Why we're having more of it? Is this up from baseline? Are we just hearing about it more now? What's going on?
Okay, I love it. So why are we talking about this today, of all days?
Well, we're talking about it today because there have been a bunch of hacks in the past week and a half.
Tell us about them.
If you're used to the blockchain world, this is nothing new to you. Something's getting hacked all the time, or something's getting leaked all the time accidentally. But the things that have happened this week in reverse chronological order are Mercor, Axios, NPM, and then LiteLLM.
And there were some others, right?
There's some others.
These are like
these are the big ones.
Big ones.
Yeah, these are the big ones.
And I thought there was this wasn't a hack, but this was sort of like a related bad dev practice situation from Anthropic.
Kinda. Yeah.
It's
like actually a good dev practice if you want to have really good logging and metrics.
Okay.
Like you need a sitemap for Sentry.
Okay.
So
anyway, the gist is that this is suddenly taking an uptick. And one of the instigating events of maybe like a special focus or fear was this supposed what I've been dubbing the accidental leak on purpose from last week. Thursday evening, Fortune reporter breaks that Anthropic is going to launch a new model. Product name was Capybara. Project name was Mythos. Basically, they found supposedly thousands of documents related to a content management system that were publicly available as URL endpoints or whatever. And the Fortune reporter finds these supposedly by doing good sleuthing, and finds out about this upcoming model, and it's talking about how dangerous and like this thing could hack everything. Cybersecurity risk should be on the highest threat, whatever, which is the same playbook, more or less, not the accidental leak on purpose, but the framing. The next model is so much better, high threat level for cybersecurity.
I think
OpenAI did early February. Sam Altman was tweeting all about it. So the model providers, whether it's marketing or not, are talking about how AI models are cybersecurity threats, and also we're seeing all these hacks in the real world. That's what's happening.
That's kind of what we're talking about, yeah.
So should we be scared? I'm scared. Not necessarily about this, but I'm scared.
some people should be scared.
Okay. Who
I
should
think
be scared?
People who have things to lose.
Who has things to lose?
People with lots of money.
So you think if you are, this is the worst time in the history of the world to be wealthy.
Yeah, if you're rich right now, you're cooked. You're done. You're done.
And so what you should do to protect yourself is give Walter all of your money.
Give it to me.
Because then you won't have any money.
I will fall on the sword.
If
I'll
you never,
sacrifice myself.
if you have nothing to lose, you can't lose anything.
You can't lose anything. You'll have family still.
And that's the most important thing.
There you
Okay,
go.
so tell me more. Like, what actually? What's your threat level here, and who should actually be worried, and why?
Yeah. So I think my threat level is actually pretty high, even though I'm making light of the situation, only because there is a practice in the development world, and a good practice, to not rebuild everything from scratch.
Okay.
So you use something like Axios. So Axios is a request library. So it's like an async HTTP client used by almost every startup that's using TypeScript, which is one of the most common languages to use if you're like building a company from scratch. It's used by a bunch of bigger companies. It's used by a bunch of other people. And then they have this random thing in Axios based on some other dependency that allows someone to just like deposit code onto your computer that can just execute anything. So the very specific...
That sounds bad.
It's really bad.
Okay.
It's pretty horrible. The very specific thing that happened was that there is a dependency that Axios had, I believe, that was run in a post-install script. So after you install the package, there's a script that would run instantly, and this post-install script had something called a RAT, which is a remote access Trojan. And so this remote access Trojan would basically determine what operating system you have, and then it will deposit the correct actual RAT for your different operating system. So this is a pretty sophisticated bespoke attack. So depending on what macOS you have or Windows operating system you have, it will deposit a different random binary of code. The remote access part of this means that whoever has this on your device can remotely access it, which is bad.
Okay.
And it's extra bad because as far as people can tell so far, there haven't been any signs of typically when you have a remote access Trojan, because I can execute any code on your computer, I'll create a botnet, and that botnet would be used for crypto mining or web scraping or some kind of botting of some kind. This type of thing hasn't been happening, which makes it seem like what's happening is information collection. So imagine you have a company and you have some code running somewhere on some computers. Someone's just siphoning all this information away. So private cluster information, proprietary information, all these different things are just getting taken by this person remotely, essentially, is probably what's happening. Or that seems like what's happening. And that's really bad because Axios is in everything. Everywhere. All the time. Pretty much.
Wow.
Axios is all over the internet. I've used Axios so
I
many
was
times.
just thinking, there's a lot there that's interesting, but I was just thinking about how if you're Axios, the news organization,
cooked.
This is hilarious.
This is pretty funny. Yeah.
Because you have to, I think you should actually, I think it's an optimal strategy for you to write an article, try to be the first one to publish this, get the most views on your article, to highlight that Axios was hacked, but the first line of your article is that not us.
Not us. Them.
Axios, a thing you previously never heard of and probably don't care about that much or at all, was hacked. It is not Axios, the news organization.
Yeah.
But Axios hacked and people collecting a ton of information sounds like a really bad headline for the Axios news organization. But that's not what happened, folks. That's not what happened. I would like everyone to know.
Yeah. Actually, if something I forgot to mention, you're not going to like this. A part of how this hack ended up in the Axios package is that one of the main maintainers, it was pushed from an old token that was approved, an old NPM token that was approved for usage. But this person has claimed, and if this is true, this is scary, that pretty much everything they interface with uses 2FA or multi-factor authentication. And so somehow it bypassed this.
Well, 2FA doesn't mean 2FA can mean a lot of things.
100%. But I think that is industry standard for how you protect a lot of these things, at the average place. And so people are kind of oh, our really bad security practices are going to cook all of us now, and we all have to change that very quickly at these massive organizations. And that's kind of
and small organizations. Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot to actual operation security is very hard because people don't care about it.
Yeah.
They don't understand it. And actually, as someone who has tried to reason through threat vectors, there are always more threat vectors than there are solutions you can provide, basically. And people just do stuff you don't expect. So there are a lot of problems there. The one thing I will say is, like, of course, someone's going to say, "Oh, I'm pretty sure I used."
Yeah, of course,
Someone
of
saying
course.
I used 2FA, who knows if that's even true?
I agree. But I'm saying in the world where that is true, that is the bar.
I mean, it's like, okay, I was using 2FA, but like you had OpenClaw on, and it read your
No,
2FA
no,
SMS
no.
code, which like already
Don't
we
talk
know,
about him like that, please.
You
This is
gotta
a
have
good man.
phishing resistant
This is a good
2FA, like right there. There are all these layers.
Yeah,
there are all
there
these
are
layers. Everything
lots
is
of
not
layers.
the same.
Yeah.
Okay, so Axios gets hacked. Another one. Give me another one. It's interesting.
There's LiteLLM. So LiteLLM, their entire thing is that they are a really nice connector for 100 different LLM providers. Basically, you drop LiteLLM in, and you can interface with a bunch of things like Amazon Bedrock or like whatever Azure has or whatever these other companies have that will provide you with some model, essentially. It's apparently, allegedly, based on, I think it's like a pretty reputable organization, it's in 36% of cloud environments right now, LiteLLM, because everyone's doing things with AI. It was used in PyPy, which is a massive project. It's used all over the internet. And also, like, it's just another, like, this was also like a supply chain attack, kind of. They imported a package that was compromised by like these other people, and then these people use that to compromise all these companies. And it also seems like this is another time where they're just trying to like extract information from these companies again.
And so people understand, LiteLLM, basically, in my view, is a product that makes sense for one of two reasons. One, because you're lazy and you want something that makes it a little bit easier for you to directly tap into multiple AI provider interfaces. And as someone who has shipped things now using Claude Code, which is highly, I'm sure, insecure to the topic of this episode, but who cares? I'm not building sensitive critical infrastructure that anyone is using. It's very easy. You just need to basically make it so, you have some API key connection, whatever, to that particular LLM provider. And I know you're going to say something else, but it's just true.
I don't know if that's true.
It's just true.
That's not true. That's just not how the internet works. That's not how you build something on the internet, which is like you rebuild everything because one small thing is simple.
No, but building a connection into
I think
API,
building like reliable like reconnection, et cetera, for like streaming. Like I think these things are trivial if that's the only thing you are doing or it's part of a small project. But if you have like a not big team and you're trying to build something bigger,
look, if you don't
building that specific thing.
But you're spending your time trying to optimize how you're using particular AI models. So
not necessarily. It depends on what your product is. Like let's say no. Let's say I'm building like an enterprise coding tool, right? And I want people to be able to use a bunch of different models in my enterprise coding tool because
you're
I'm
building
not
an enterprise coding tool and you can't think about this. You're building an enterprise coding tool and you're too lazy to directly
then
optimize the connection.
You
should be optimizing your own connection.
You could say the same thing about like using Axios. It's just it's just an HTTP client, like library. You could rebuild one of those with Claude Code, 100%.
Yeah, you could now, and it's probably. I mean, that's what Andre Karpathy recommends now.
Yeah. But I think a lot of these things you can now build.
But anyway, I don't agree.
People haven't been building in this paradigm for a long time, so these things just exist this way. So you have to like rip it out, and it's probably not like top of your business to like rip out every dependency.
But I'm just saying.
So I don't know if lazy. I think call it laziness to use.
I think it's unfair to equate Axios to LiteLLM. LiteLLM is clearly a service provider that many companies choose not to use because it's not that hard to connect into these APIs.
Sure.
Whereas Axios is like, okay, we have this extremely base level framework that everything uses.
LiteLLM is used by a lot of things now.
Well, out of laziness.
But so I feel like if you're a 5-person startup, I don't know if you were doing this 3 years ago.
I wouldn't use LiteLLM.
Sure, but the thing is, people were building these things.
Products.
People were building these things 3 years ago when you couldn't just spin this thing up in 2 minutes. And once you started building something, to spend the time and reprioritize as a company to rip it out.
I just don't agree with this
because calling it laziness.
I know from working on products for many years in a row, through the evolutions of the AI APIs, I've only had people on small teams tell me, oh, there's no reason to use these like model routing services. It just doesn't make sense. It's not worth it. Because it's not like, it's not like.
But like, how many models are you routing to in your case? In these cases,
3, 4.
These people might be routing to more. Like, right? Like, and you probably want an interface that is just like smooth for like 50 potentially. Depends on what you're building.
What models are you routing to? I mean,
I think it's not models. It's not models. It's providers. Like, let's say I am building a product and I want like backup and reliability. One, I want to be able to access a bunch of models that might be hosted on different things. And 2, I want backups for all these models. So I want to be able to connect to Amazon Bedrock specifically. I want to be able to like connect to like Grok. I want to be able to connect to like, Base 10, like all these like different things.
Okay.
Like, it's
well, that's your product, so you should actually build it. Anyway, I find it hard to believe that someone is connecting to so many models and it's not their core product. Whatever. The other reason I was to say you should use LiteLLM is, in theory, like if you're building something that's needs some sort of crazy grade of security, maybe you want to focus your attention on a very particular part of the security stack. And so you would outsource to LiteLLM in theory because they have excellent security practices. But I think the reality is we all know that like none of these,
Well, actually, it was a security tool that got hacked. And that's
right.
why.
This is what I'm saying. Yeah. It's like we all know that none of these like, Series A, B, C, D startups are doing like unbelievably incredible cybersecurity practice. In fact, I think people increasingly feel the opposite because those are the companies that are quickest and best at adopting every possible AI coding tool, which means no one's reading the PRs. No one's thinking about these kinds of things. People are like abstracting away increasingly. So that's fun. Okay, so LiteLLM got hacked. Not so good. Then what happens?
They got pulled from PyPy. Got pulled.
Didn't they just revert the version?
No, I think they pulled it completely.
They pulled it completely.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy. What was the impact of that?
Of LiteLLM getting pulled?
Yeah. No, of it getting hacked.
Of it getting hacked? No one knows yet. That's the problem.
We don't know.
With like even like the Axios thing, right? Like I have access. Like usually with a hack, you're like getting a bunch of information.
Am I in danger? What should I be doing?
They might have access to your information through some service you're using.
Okay. Which service am I using? I don't use LiteLLM.
But like even if you're using something that uses Axios or something that's using LiteLLM.
Axios, yeah.
Or even like something or if you're using something that is using LiteLLM, like your information is still vulnerable.
Oh my god. Well, what information?
Depends on what you have on the service.
Because all like airlines get hacked and like I don't know. I feel like one time like some movie theater rewards program got hacked. It just happens eventually.
I don't know who's using Axios or not. So
okay.
It's a lot of people though.
What are people saying? Like how?
I don't think people are saying anything. Like no company is coming out and saying anything. They're all trying to fix the problem currently.
Wow.
Yeah, because this is really bad.
Okay, so those two get hacked. What else?
Mercor got hacked. All of Mercor's data is just publicly available.
All of it?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Not all of it.
Like they have interviews. They have like Slack.
Tell us about Mercor. I don't think people know what Mercor is.
Mercor.
I don't know what Mercor is. I have a friend who works there, but I don't know.
This guy's a liar.
Is.
Mercor is a.
I mean, I know who they are.
Yeah. You don't know what they do. Okay. They are a company worth $10 billion. Pretty big company, pretty successful. They
VC valuation $10 billion.
Yeah.
It's not a publicly traded company, right?
Yeah, no,
okay.
Definitely not. No company is. You can get to $1 trillion valuation now, and not be publicly traded.
That hasn't happened yet, though.
No. OpenAI just raised again at like 800 and something.
Do you think SpaceX? Who's going to be the first $1 trillion private company?
I feel like it's.
We can talk about that on another
or
episode.
Anthropic. I doubt
do some research.
I don't think it'll be SpaceX.
Okay, interesting.
Probably go public before that.
Yeah,
Mercor got hacked. Mercor is they basically sell data to labs. They do a lot of work to make it really easy to get high quality data or data in general.
Okay, what does that mean though? Because like, do you remember like 10 years ago when every startup in theory was like, oh, we don't have a business model. What we're going to do is like, we're going to have all these people be users, and then we're going to sell data. Like that's not what you're talking about, right?
Well, that is exactly what I'm talking about, except Mercor does it very explicitly. They tell you, you will do these things and we will sell this data to someone else.
But no. But you're wrong, because it's not like this is a social network.
No, I said it, but they do it very explicitly. They contract you and they say, do these tasks for us and we will sell this data to someone else.
Right. And so it's not like just use the, it's not like become a user and then
No.
we know your email
Yeah.
address or whatever, and
Yeah.
we're going to sell this to some advertising network or whatever.
Yeah.
That business model wasn't real ever, more or less.
Yeah.
This is something different. And what is it more explicitly?
I am an AI lab. I want to
Yes, you are.
train my LLM to do something specific, or I want to do some RL, reinforcement learning, or I want to do some like other type of post training or something else. And I need very specific human data. So I need an expert in law to do post training for my LLM. I will go to Mercor and be like, get me a massive data set of high fidelity law information. Mercor goes out and they contract a bunch of people who dropped out of law school and they say, I like your degree. They're probably lawyers too. They're definitely lawyers as well. I'm being facetious.
Generally, they are actually lawyers.
Yeah, generally they are. And they'll just be like, hey, we'll pay you $300 an hour, answer these questions, basically, or do this thing. It depends. Like these things, sometimes it's just answer a question. Sometimes it's do a task, and they just like record it, and this data gets given to the lab, and the lab will use this for their training. Essentially, this is what Mercor does. So there's like two sides to their business. Now, one side is like this data side, and the other side is now reinforcement learning stuff. So they're doing some other things that are more like reinforcement learning focused, which is like we're building a gem for a lab, we're building this thing for a lab, and like that's kind of another thing that they do. But all these things are for selling to AI labs to make better models, essentially. They got hacked because of using an AI coding tool, allegedly. They leaked some keys. I don't know the exact details of how the keys were leaked through the AI coding tool, but the keys were leaked. The person then got like 900 gigabytes of source code. Don't know how you have that much. It's a lot. It's a lot.
What does that mean?
It's like
Source code. Explain source code.
Okay, source code is just like the code that they use for their platform. So the platform that you'd see if you're like one of these lawyers contracting. Also the platform you'd probably see if you're one of the AI labs getting the data. Probably something that like internal tools that like, you know, they're using like at Mercor to like get this work done. That got hacked, that got leaked. A lot of the data that they actually have like collected also has been leaked.
Most of the data or some of it?
I think it's most. Yeah, I think it's pretty much everything. Yeah. Internal Slack is leaked.
So like, okay, you could say a customer of Mercor, you said AI research labs.
Mhm.
So what that means to me is like there's Anthropic, there's OpenAI, there's XAI,
There's Cohere.
there's Google.
There's Google, yeah.
Cohere is a customer, maybe.
There's like
okay, I don't know.
probably like
I don't know
all
what
30
you're
of them are customers. Imbue, there's a bunch of
Okay, so there are these companies that basically pay them to collect some data and they use it to train or whatever.
Mhm.
This data in a format that's like usable for like, let's say DeepSeek, the Chinese model that caught everyone by surprise, you know, some random company, could be in China, could be in the US, could be in Europe, could be wherever, now could just be like, oh my gosh, we have this data that Google used to make their models better. We can do the same. Is that how this works?
It'd probably help improve their models potentially, but I think like data is only one of the inputs into what makes a model good. There's also like the amount of compute you have, and like just the straight up science, like the algorithms you're using, the techniques you're using, et cetera, et cetera. And so this will probably could help you improve your model for sure if you have more data, more high quality data for sure.
And for free now.
Yeah, for free. There's like so much so there's even like recordings of interviews.
Ooh.
With like just like candidates like out, like a lot of stuff is leaked.
Yeah. Oh, I don't like that.
Yeah, like yeah.
Have you ever been hired by Mercor?
I haven't been hired by Mercor.
I haven't been hired by Mercor.
I haven't been contracted by them. No.
I do think they should hire me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I do a lot of incredibly weird workflows. I think I'm really in a very small
set of people
really small set of people who do what I do. So, Mercor, if you're out there, and I don't care about the interviews showing up publicly because
how many an hour? How much an hour?
1,000 plus easily. Depends on the thing.
Yeah.
So because sometimes I've heard people talk about I don't know about for Mercor where, but I've had friends or people in my orbit tell me they've done some of these like training tasks.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them have said like it requires a lot of focus. Like they put you to work for real.
Yeah.
I think this wasn't as true with Scale AI. I think I generally heard that
Scale AI.
that was like people were messing around and whatever.
Yeah.
But for some of the ones that are still alive or whatever. I mean, I don't know. No offense to Scale AI. I don't know if they're alive or dead.
They got acquired by Oh no.
No. But
that was
it was
just
yeah. It's very complicated.
Yeah.
The way Silicon Valley
the
works.
Founder left, and then the company was still
absolutely. It's confusing to everyone, I think, but a lot of people pretend they understand how it's working.
Yeah.
I won't say which side I'm on. Okay, so Mercor gets hacked, and how did this happen again?
This is a group called Laspus.
Laspus?
Yeah, some hacking group. They said that they did it.
They just figured it out. Okay.
Yeah.
That's not good.
Yeah, it's not great. Not great stuff.
Okay, and then somebody else got hacked.
It was just like a general NPM supply chain hack. Like NPM had some like issues.
And NPM. So you at the beginning you're talking about Axios and you're talking about installing packages and stuff. Mm-hmm. I think even now in the Claude Code era, still 90% of people, probably more, have never installed a package, don't know what NPM is.
They might not have, but their Claude Code might.
No, but even in Claude Code era, I think I think it's still 90% of people.
Oh, really? Really? You think so?
Because there used to be like the stat used to be that there are like 20 million software engineers in the world.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is like tiny.
Yeah.
So say it's 10x'd.
Yeah.
We're still not even close to 10% of the globe's population.
Yeah, but I really think that Claude Code is just installing it on its own for a lot of these people.
No. But what I mean is like people aren't even using Claude Code.
Oh, that's what you mean. Like
this guy, listen to the bubble this guy exists in, which is how you know his info is good.
You think
they're using report on the bubble?
They're using like Lovable or something else?
No, they're not even.
They're not coding.
They're just not.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying.
Oh, you're saying people in the world have NPM. I thought you meant people who are coding.
I'm saying about 10% of people.
People who aren't.
Oh, people are coding. 100%.
Okay, I was like,
no. I'm saying I think 90% of the world has not, maybe more.
Yeah.
But certainly.
I'm gonna ask Lena a question. Lena, have you heard of NPM? No. Okay. Yeah.
Have you used Claude Code? No. Never? Okay, she said, "Why would I be coding something?" That's our producer.
Crazy take.
She's great. We appreciate all of her work.
Yeah. But crazy take.
Wow. Okay. See. Come on.
Yeah. I thought you meant people who code, people who are writing code or interacting with a coding thing.
No.
Yeah, but in the world, for sure.
As per usual.
For sure, in the world, for sure.
So what is NPM? What is installing a package? Why do you got to do that?
So NPM stands for Node Package Manager. I mentioned TypeScript earlier. TypeScript, JavaScript, basically the same language. It's a language you can write some code in. You get some beautiful things out of this language if you write the right code. There's billions of dollars in your laptop if you type the right things in TypeScript. It's true.
Cool.
It's true. It's 100% true. Right prompt.
Sure.
You probably need to write 500 words, and you could make a lot of money. I'm joking.
Not on this podcast. Continue.
You,
Node Package Manager.
Node Package Manager. Basically, it's the tool you use to install their packages. Packages being other bits of code that someone else has written that you want to use. So Axios, for example, which is something people use a lot because they don't want to write their own HTTP client, they will install it using NPM.
Okay.
And NPM had a bit of a hack as well, another supply chain hack where there was some dependency that NPM was using, and then there was like an injection. And I think allegedly it's the same people who did.
Who does NPM? Who runs Node Package Manager?
I think it's just a company called NPM.
You're kidding.
I think it's actually a company. Yeah, you have to pay them. Like there's a company.
Really?
Yeah, I think it's a company. I don't think it's Node. No, it's definitely not the Node Foundation. I don't think it's the Node Foundation.
What's Node?
Node is a JavaScript runtime.
NPM is a package manager for the JavaScript programming language. This is from Wikipedia, by the way, so it's a trusted resource, not from Google AI answer response thing. It's a subsidiary of GitHub.
Oh, GitHub owns it.
And people don't know what GitHub is, but I've learned really people do not know what GitHub is. When I talk to people about Git, I blank stares.
You know what's so crazy about that? I think if way more things had version control, the way that people work globally would change so much.
But I think that's unfair because, I mean, like Google Drive has version control.
Yeah. When I say version, I think Git version control, where it's like, I think Google Drive's version control needs to be like just slightly more granular, just a little
less
bit more
automated. Is what you think.
little bit more powerful, just a touch more powerful.
No, I agree with that.
This guy. No faith in
You
humanity.
would say that as a developer. No. It's just
No
like
faith
I
in
think Google
people.
Drive is awesome. I also bet you are not a Google Drive, like Google Docs power user, or
Not
a Google
anymore.
Sheets
I used
power
to be.
user.
It used to be.
All right. Well, anyway, so GitHub is a company that what does GitHub the company do? They
Microsoft is a company.
Oh, does Microsoft own GitHub? Oh my gosh.
That's why all the Copilot stuff gets rolled out.
It's a subsidiary of a subsidiary of a subsidiary. Is that true? I think yeah, it is true. Okay. So NPM is a subsidiary of a Microsoft subsidiary. GitHub is the primary interface and tooling around Git. Git is basically a system that allows developers to save files in a way that makes sense for development workflows. That's what I'll give people for now. Maybe we'll do an episode on Git at some later date and the dangers of PRs,
What's
pull
crazy?
requests, which people don't know what that is.
This
by
is
the
like
way.
the oldest like tech meme ever. They made Git without Git.
Wow.
Think about that.
I mean,
Crazy.
and by the way, it's GIT,
Yeah.
just as GitHub, GIT hub.
Yeah. Also GitLab.
Okay, so NPM is in fact, it's a
It's a company. Yeah.
it's a company.
Like if, for example, I know this because I wanted to have private repos for myself, and I was like, I have to pay them a subscription to get private repos. Like, what are you talking about?
Wow.
Yeah, private repos where I can also have an NPM package. It's like it's a whole.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that got hacked.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it got hacked because it's not open source,
I think,
or is it open source?
I don't know if NPM is open source actually, but I do. I lean towards the idea that things being open source is better. Like things that are closed source are getting hacked all the time too, and also I kind of trust crypto researchers, security researchers, because they're kind of at the frontier of things getting hacked, and a lot of them often say make the thing open source. One, a lot of the time someone closed sources something because their code is bad and they're scared for the world to know it. So if your things are default open source, you probably have higher code quality because people are like actually looking at what the code looks like.
Yeah, this is actually really funny. So from this Wikipedia article, and this I'm doing this at speed. I'm not using AI, which is silly. Part of the thing that NPM does is it lets you use open source packages in your code base.
Mm-hmm.
But NPM itself is not open source.
Yeah,
The world is a magical place.
that's great.
Okay, so they got hacked, and now like all software is bad.
All software it's horrible. If it's
No,
in TypeScript.
give the real.
Well, I think this is again.
Everything I do is in
So-
TypeScript.
yeah.
So what should I be doing?
Stop
Stop what?
doing things.
Actually.
Just stop. No, I think again, if you have something to lose, then you are in problems and you're in a bad place. But otherwise, you might be okay. I think the big thing about all these hacks in general, especially except for the Mercor hack, is that you just don't know what the impact is until you know. Especially for something like a remote access Trojan. Like let's say someone just had a remote access to your computer. What do you think? Like what's the damage that they've done? Like you don't know.
Well, I don't know. What can the remote access actually do?
It can access all your information. It can execute code. It can do whatever it wants, basically. Like your computer is now just a
Like
bot.
it can browse the web?
It could browse the web. Like all your keychain passkeys. Actually, no, those are in a secure enclave. You probably can't hack those. But it depends on which.
What about my LastPass?
Maybe I think those things are weird because, for example, your secure enclave. It depends on what secure enclave you have because sometimes some of the most of them have been hacked, but there's a couple that are new that haven't been hacked and there's been an update where it's not hacked anymore. So it's this is hard. Actually, one of my favorite things that I heard
What's a
someone
secure
say,
enclave?
a secure enclave is basically like a chip or a thing on your computer that is impenetrable. Essentially, you can put code in
theory.
In theory, you can put code in there and that code execution is perfect. Basically, if secure enclaves were secure and good, you wouldn't need blockchains. Blockchains are compute that is provably true and accurate and good because of consensus. If you just had a chip on your computer that could just execute code correctly, we could put all of the code on the blockchain into the chip, and then the chip would just execute the code correctly, and we just know everyone's code is working the right way. But you can hack these things, so you can't do that.
Huh. Okay, so I think we should wrap this up.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about Cloud Code quickly? No.
what I was going to say is I want to give you the opportunity to give us like 3 rapid, like I'm just hearing like everything's getting hacked,
Yeah.
but that's because we're doing an episode on everything getting
Everything
hacked.
gets hacked. Yeah.
So we're giving a misrepresentation of the world, I think.
Yeah.
What are the real 3 takeaways here? And I think one of them has something to do with like, is Cloud Code good or bad for the, like what, what's going on here?
Okay. So one, there's a lot of code written with AI. AI is getting better, and we don't really know what the world looks like with better AI. Like, are these hacks caused by AI? Is it because AI, like in the Mercor case, the code was written with AI and they were using AI tools, and that's what caused the hack. In some other cases, the people that are doing the hacking are using the AI tools to do the hacking. Basically, all in all, the world is moving really, really fast at the pace that it seems like many of us can't keep up with. And that's scary because it's like, hockey stick, exponential. The growth is ridiculous. That's one. 2, you probably don't have to worry about this too much. Like, these things have already happened. If you're a developer, pin to the correct version, use correctly pinned versions. That's probably good for you. Keep doing that.
If you're developing in Cloud Code, how do you do that?
You either make sure your agent is doing this all the time, or like, I think just go to the package.json file and make sure the version is pinned. Just do it yourself. Just do this tiny thing yourself, because
what does that even mean?
Okay, so in
like a little setting I can put that says
in a package.json file,
version.
there's a little caret right beside the version number, and if the caret's there, it means it will automatically upgrade it. If the caret's not there, it's pinned to that version. Just adjust that. That's basically all it is.
That easy.
Yeah.
But what if you don't want to update because the updated packages are more exploitable?
Well, you shouldn't. I'm saying you should pin the package, right? If you have the caret there, then it will just always be upgrading. Whenever you reinstall, it will upgrade potentially on its own.
But I'm saying the upgrade might be the source of the hack. That was what happened with LiteLLM.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. Like, you should pick pinned versions and like use them. So, for example, for Node, the odd versions are unstable and the even versions are stable. Like, these little things you should know as a developer, like which versions are stable, which versions aren't. Pin to the stable version. Don't use the unstable version. You don't need it. There's no way you need it. New tool comes out, give it some time. Let someone else do the penetration testing on the new thing, and then use it later on. I think with the AI tools themselves, like, being fast to them is good, but the newest version of some random package is probably not meaningful to you as a developer. And I think third, I think there's a lot of work that we have to do as developers and people in the world to understand how to work with AI. I think one of the things that I've been struggling with and I've been thinking about a lot is that almost everything that you find annoying as a developer, as a human developer, is really good for AI, and AI can be really good at it. So I have really specific linting rules now. I have really specific commit rules. And it took me some time to set them up, and I'm still trying to figure out how to work around these things. And before, you probably wouldn't be doing this because it would be kind of cumbersome, and you want to make a quick change, you can't make the quick change. But these really strict rules about how code should be written and how things should be done, AI can do it. It can type faster than you can. So it's kind of good to do these things. I think we need to do more work to figure out how to work alongside these AI tools as programmers. Also, 4. This is my 4th one and my last one. All of our mistakes as human coders will be revealed. This is literally everything is just a ticking time bomb, basically. So go fix things. Go find things and fix them now before you get hacked.
All right. Everything's getting hacked. It's all good.
Yeah, it's fine though.
That's it. That's what Walter says.
Go read a book. I don't know.
Go outside. Yeah. There's a lot to keep up with these days.
Yeah.
And that is why I think people should listen to Buzzword Salad. New podcast featuring almost always Walter, probably often me.
Yeah.
And a roving cast of other characters.
Yeah. We'll see.
Thanks for listening to this first episode.
First episode of Buzzword Salad.